Alright, you guys asked for it, so here we are. This is part 2 of all the copycat heroes between the MCU and DC. I noticed you guys had a lot of recommendations about who to include, and that feedback has gone into this list. Honestly, there's enough similarity between Marvel and DC for 10 parts, but let's get into some more famous heroes who just might be total ripoffs. Batman and Iron Man. Bruce Wayne first appeared in Detective Comics number 27, 1939. The first time we saw Batman on screen? The 1943 15-chapter theatrical film, Batman starring Louis Gilbert Wilson. And Tony Stark hit the scene in Tales of Suspense number 48, 1959. He made it to the movies with 2008's Iron Man, which you guys are all too familiar with. On paper, they're the same archetype. Incredibly wealthy, non-powered geniuses who use their endless bank accounts to build cutting-edge arsenals and fund their universe's main superhero teams. Plus, they're both playboys too, though I gotta hand it to Tony in that department.
You ever lose an hour's sleep your whole life?
Be prepared to lose a few with you.
Oh yeah, did I mention they're both orphans? In terms of similarities, I'd say Batman may have inspired the blueprint for Iron Man. There really is only one of their kind in both of their universes, geniuses operating with budgets bigger than most countries. There are a few more too. They're both kind of control freaks. Bruce likes to think he can take on all of Gotham's problems alone, and to be honest, can't he? Plus, that guy has a plan for everything, a lot like how Tony has an invention for everything, but it's rooted in the same place. They both believe they can prepare for any situation thanks to their unique and extreme talents, which honestly, on many occasions, they both have. Batman has a contingency plan for almost every Justice League member, Superman included.
Alfred, get the Batwing ready. The Justice League is under attack.
By whom?
By me!
And Tony, well, you guys know how Ultron went.
Live and otherwise, that what we needed was a pseudo armor around the world. Remember that? Whether it impacted our precious freedoms or not. That's what we needed.
Well, that didn't work out, did it?
I said we.
Bruce had a similar story in JLA Tower of Babel, where Ra's al Ghul stole those contingency plans and used them to neutralize the Justice League. So, they have another thing in common. Their paranoia bites them both in the ass. Also, they both rely on their trusted right hands, Alfred Pennyworth and Jarvis. Now, I know Alfred isn't an AI, and he's a lot different from Jarvis, but you gotta admit, they're a key part of both of their operations.
You are not authorized to access this area.
Jesus.
That's Jarvis. He runs the house.
The similarities are surface level though, because the deeper you go, the more you find out these two couldn't be more fundamentally different. You see, Tony's driven by ego. He adores the spotlight, and he wants the world to know he's Iron Man.
The truth is, I am Iron Man.
Plus, Tony suffers deeply from his relationship with his dad, Howard, who, despite being a genius inventor, did a lot of psychological damage to Tony. Years and years of drunken abuse at the hands of Howard turned Tony into a raging alcoholic too. To Tony, Iron Man is the mask, but to Batman, Bruce Wayne is the disguise. There's a reason his villains never want his identity revealed. It's because if Batman officially had no more reason to be Bruce Wayne, then it wouldn't be a crusade on crime anymore. It would be a one-night massacre. Tony's biggest superpower is his brain, but Batman's is his determination and will. And no, for both of them, it's not the money. Otherwise, Tony would just be another Justin Hammer. Bruce's decades spent tempering his body, will, and mind are what make him so lethal. Tony's prodigal genius is what makes him a threat, even locked up in a cave with nothing but a box of scraps. Also, one of the biggest differences, and I know this might sound rough, at least Bruce's dad loves him, and he loves his dad back. Can't say the same about Tony and Howard if we're talking comics strictly. They have a much tighter relationship in the MCU. Also, even the way they use their tech is different. Batman's almost entirely about stealth and getting the job done as efficiently as possible. Tony, he's all about the spectacle. I mean, the guy can literally fire a laser beam from his chest. Batman can definitely work a suit of armor like Tony's though, and he has before. It's a bit like Hawkeye and Green Arrow from our Part 1 video, where they often get compared a lot, and no doubt the connection is there. but they are not mirrors of each other. Also, Bruce really doesn't have Tony's sense of humor.
Did you seriously just say hitherto undreamt of?
Are you seriously leaning on the cauldron of the cosmos? Is that what that is?
Zatanna and Scarlet Witch. This one's a bit more on the nose, since ironically they both were introduced in 1964. Wanda Maximoff first appeared in the X-Men number 4, and Zatanna first appeared in Hawkman number 4. They even have the same issue numbers. Technically, Wanda's was in March, while Zatanna was a November release, so Scarlet Witch was first, but who's counting? In terms of live action, Zatanna actually made an appearance in Smallville in 2009. Wanda made her debut in the Winter Soldier's mid-credits scene. Their relationships with their father, Giovanni and Magneto, are also pretty big parts of their character throughout their runs in Marvel and DC. Zatanna spent her early comic book years on a massive quest to find her missing father. It was a whole run called Zatanna's Search. Their relationship is also a lot more loving and wholesome than Wanda and Magneto's. You know, at one point, Magneto even jailed Wanda for not taking his side. They're both uniquely powerful sorceresses who are among the top magic users of their universe, and their powers are a bit similar too. They're both the trump cards of their teams as far as magic goes, and they both can change the rules of the universe. They both fly, shoot beams of magic out, manipulate people's minds, and they're also both glass cannons, super powerful, but you can take them out pretty quickly if you manage to land a blow. Zatanna uses magic through logomancy, which is essentially speaking spells backwards to enhance their power. Wanda rewrites reality through, well, to be honest, she kind of just does it. Yeah, chaos magic and all, but the scale is what's different here. Wanda can literally rewrite things on a universal scale, and there was no better showcase of that than during House of M. With just 3 words, she basically wiped out every mutant's powers. Zatanna can do similar stuff even if it's not on the same scale. She erased all of her fellow superheroes' memories in Identity Crisis. She did the same thing to the secret society of supervillains to make them forget the identities of the Justice League. So yeah, they're both adept magic users, and both their dads play a heavy role in their lives, even if Wanda's parents have been retconned 1,000 times over. And they're both often messing around with people's lives through that magic because... reasons? At least Zatanna thinks she's acting for the greater good, though. Black Spider, Spider-Man, and Punisher. I think this one is pretty obvious. I mean, the name really says it all. First debuting in Detective Comics number 463 in 1976, Black Spider had a different personality, but his looks screamed Spider-Man down to the web-slinging. As for Peter Parker, the legendary web crawler first swung into comics back in Amazing Fantasy number 15 in 1962. But this is actually a comparison between 3 characters, and the third, Frank Castle, first popped up in the Amazing Spider-Man number 129 in 1974, just 2 years before Black Spider. As for their live actions, Black Spider hasn't debuted in anything besides Young Justice the Animated Series. Meanwhile, Spidey's first live action was in 1997. On the other hand, Punisher first showed up in 1989. Now, in the Young Justice version, Black Spider is a total Spider-Man clone. His abilities, the webs, the quips, and his personality, they're even voiced by the same guy.
You were warned, Mr. Jones. No one likes a crusading reporter.
Josh Keaton voiced Spectacular Spider-Man and Black Spider.
I am the Spectacular Spider-Man!
Visually and physically, there are so many coincidences that it's impossible to think Black Spider wasn't directly inspired by Peter Parker. Their fighting moves and classic acrobatic poses are practically identical. But when you look at their actual abilities in the comics, it's not so cut and dry. Peter Parker has genuine superhuman agility and relies strictly on non-lethal gadgets to stop crime. Eric Needham, on the other hand, doesn't have superpowers. He uses high-tech wrist cables to mimic web slinging, and he relies on a highly lethal arsenal of claws, gadgets, and firearms. Their ethics are just as different. We all know Peter's story and his strict moral code.
What's important is not standing by and allowing someone to suffer or die because you do nothing. If you don't get that, then you don't get the first thing about being Spider-Man.
But before putting on the mask, Eric Needham was a swindler who actually accidentally killed his own father during a botched robbery. He kills criminals with lethal force and deadly precision, and absolutely does not want to give them a second chance. Actually, his lethal methods have pissed off Batman on more than one occasion. Meanwhile, the first time Doc Ock took over Spidey's body and truly let a punch fly, he knocked Scorpion's jaw clean off. Only then did he realize just how severely Spider-Man holds back. Honestly, it's mostly just aesthetics and naming. If you want to talk about the character underneath, Eric Needham is a lot more like Frank Castle. You see, Black Spider might have Spidey's clothes, but he stole Frank's whole personality. Both are deeply traumatized men whose lives were shattered by violent crime. Eric caused his own trauma, but Frank lost his family in a mob shootout. The way they responded to it is almost identical though. Both these guys took justice into their own hands, strapped on an arsenal of military-grade equipment, and started shooting the city up every chance they got. They even go after the same kind of criminal, drug dealers, and mobsters. Guardian and Captain America. If both of these feel awfully similar to you, it might be because the same people made them. In 1940, comic legends Joe Simon and Jack Kirby created Captain America for Marvel with his first appearance in Captain America's Comics #1 in 1941. Just over a year later, they took their talents to DC Comics and essentially tried to strike lightning twice. In 1942, they debuted The Guardian in Star Spangled Comics #7. Guardian hasn't made a proper live-action debut yet, but before Chris Evans could ever grace the screen, we had 1944's Captain America. The similarities are painfully obvious. Jim Harper, aka the Guardian, is a police officer / vigilante who doesn't possess any superpowers. Just like Cap, he dedicates his life to fighting the bad guys. He wears a supersuit and carries an almost indestructible shield. Also, Jim was eventually cloned by Project Cadmus, and several copies were made from his DNA, which is very similar to how everyone is constantly trying to recreate the success of Steve Rogers and Erskine's super soldier serum. Simon and Kirby even gave him a gang of kid sidekicks called the Newsboy Legion, which is incredibly similar to Cap having Bucky Barnes. Honestly, they basically only needed to change the colors of the suit to confirm he is a copy of Captain America. But this matchup is the perfect example of why copying a formula doesn't guarantee a hit. Captain America became a massive global icon. Guardian, on the other hand, just didn't hit the same. Ask anyone which of the two they recognize, and it'll be clear who worked better in the long run. Cap leads the Avengers, fights universal threats, and is generally Marvel's moral compass, alongside characters like Spidey. The Guardian is more of a street-level vigilante. Shazam and Captain Marvel. This is easily the messiest copycat situation in comic history. It literally escalated into a courtroom battle over who copied who. Back in 1940, a company called Fawcett Comics came out with Captain Marvel. He was a young boy named Billy Batson who turned into a superpowered adult by shouting a magic word. He was so popular, he actually outsold Superman. And man, not to sound like John Bernthal, but
listen, asshole, let me tell you something.
They did not like that at all. This led to DC Comics suing Fawcett for plagiarism, arguing that he was a straight copy of the Man of Steel. But here's where it gets wild. DC didn't actually win at first. In 1948, a judge ruled that while Captain Marvel was an illegal copy, DC had technically abandoned the Superman copyright because the McClure Newspaper Syndicate, one of the first newspaper publishing companies, failed to put copyright notices on the Superman comic strips. And so, the copyright was forfeited, essentially making Supes public domain. They reopened the case with a new appeal, and by 1951, the court reversed the decision and sent it down to a lower court to determine the severity of the whole situation. But by then, superhero comics were declining in sales, and Fawcett decided it wasn't worth it to fight National over this anymore. They settled out of court, paid National $400,000 in damages, and agreed to pull Captain Marvel from the shelves. But while DC was celebrating its legal win, it left the door open for an even bigger copycat move. Since the name Captain Marvel wasn't being used, Marvel Comics swooped in during 1967 and trademarked it for themselves. By the time DC finally licensed the rights to the original Billy Batson in 1972, they realized they couldn't even use his name on the cover. which really damaged his marketing. DC was forced to rename the entire brand to Shazam. Now, funny enough, Marvel's version of Captain Marvel isn't even anything like Shazam. Marvel's Carol Danvers is a hardened, disciplined military pilot carrying the weight of the cosmos on her shoulders. DC's Shazam, however, is literally a 12-year-old kid. He has the body of a god, but the brain of a middle schooler. Carol fights because she was trained to. Billy fights because being a superhero is the coolest thing that has ever happened to him. Deathstroke and Deadpool. So far, you might think that the characters aren't really all that similar, and that's how comic copycats usually go. If they were a one-to-one copy, one character would die out or be more successful, like Aquaman and Namor from our last video. But the thing is, what they usually do is copy the general vibe. Same powers, same look, similar role in the universe, but the person underneath ends up being pretty different. That's not the case here. Deadpool's a total Deathstroke ripoff. Always has been. The first live-action Deathstroke, though, he wasn't really a good adaptation. It was the 1996 Lois and Clark version. Yeah, I can't really explain this one to you either. It was just bad. That man does not feel like Deathstroke. Meanwhile, the first live-action Deadpool was Ryan Reynolds in the 2016 standalone film, and this was an immediate classic. Oh, and as a side note, we know that technically Deadpool premiered in the 2009 X-Men Origins film Wolverine, but let's face it, it isn't good enough to put in here. Slade Wilson, aka Deathstroke, the Terminator, debuted in DC in 1980. He's a biologically enhanced super soldier and the world's deadliest assassin. 11 years later, in New Mutants number 98, Marvel artist Rob Liefeld introduced a new mercenary named Wade Wilson. The name was a literal copy-paste joke because the character looked so much like a red and black version of Slade. But if you look at that early 90s Deadpool, he actually was a total ripoff. Under Liefeld and Fabian Nicieza, Wade was just a generic grim villain. He was arrogant, but he wasn't funny, and he definitely didn't break the fourth wall. After Liefeld left, Joe Kelly took over in 1997 and basically gave Deadpool his own personality. He introduced the fourth wall breaking and turned the book into a dark comedy where Wade was a goofy yet deeply tragic character. Writers like Gail Simone and eventually Daniel Way continued to crank up the meme pool aspects that became the template for the lovable goof we know today, turning the tragedy and grimness down by a lot. And that right there is the biggest difference between them. Slade Wilson has stayed the same for 40 years. He is a cold, calculating professional who treats every fight like a military operation. In terms of their skill sets, they're really similar. Both are the peak results of super soldier programs designed to create the ultimate assassin. They can both heal from stuff that would put even people like Cap or Bucky out of commission in minutes. And they both use the same arsenal too. Dual swords, heavy firearms, explosives, and as much firepower as they can strap onto themselves. Deadpool's healing is a lot more busted though. That dude can regrow his own arms. Swamp Thing and Man-Thing. Marvel's Man-Thing arrived in May, and DC's Swamp Thing followed in July 1971. Yeah, same year, same season too, really. Man-Thing came out in Savage Tales number 1, while Swamp Thing came out in House of Secrets number 92. Both were scientists who were betrayed in a swamp, dazed by chemicals, and transformed into massive moss-covered monsters. Man-Thing even had a standalone film in 2005, which was honestly pretty okay for its time. But decades before, in 1982, Swamp Thing debuted in his own live-action movie. Their powers are a bit different though. Swamp Thing is a literal god of nature with total control over the green, which is an elemental force connected to all planet life. What does that mean? Basically, he's busted. He can regrow his body from a single blade of grass or teleport across the planet through root systems. Man-Thing's not that grand. He's also a lot quieter. What he does have is his burning touch. Man-Thing secretes a lethal acid that triggers when he senses fear in others. Swamp Thing has something like that too. He can feel the emotions of forests and plant life around the globe thanks to the green. It's pretty simple here. Two guys that turned into nature-based monsters that look like they were ripped out of an H.P. Lovecraft novel. they have the whole beast of the forest vibe going for them too. They're also both tragic outcasts. They can't really turn off their transformation, and because of that, they're both forced to live a vastly different life than other superheroes who can still blend in with the public. So, those were just some of the most requested characters from you guys, and I hope we got them right. It's been almost a century of DC and Marvel, so naturally a lot of copycat situations are bound to pop up. So, who else do you think should be on here? And do you think these guys are real copycats or just similar on the surface?